Legally taking abundance from donors, we'll hear from Jay Hawkins from Feeding New York State and Josh Enderly from CET, and learn how the state is building requirements for businesses to donate food and how organizations like CET can help with that transitional learning curve that we know isn't so easy with everyone, and how to set up their system so that they can succeed. So I'll hand it over to Josh.
So good afternoon, everyone. Seven Valleys Health Coalition, Hannah, thank you guys for having us. Feeding New York State and CET, appreciate it. So today, Josh and I are going to discuss how our organizations and the programs that we manage provide free technical assistance to generators that are on the designated food scrap generator list, which is the list of businesses that are required to donate by the DEC, but we also help businesses that aren't on that list as well. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about a few other things as well. So here's the agenda for today, if it lets me go forward. There we go. So I'll elaborate a little bit more about what Feeding New York State does. Josh will talk about what CET does, and then we will talk about the New York State Food Donation and Food Scraps Recycling Law. I also want to go over enabled partner agencies with everyone versus partner agencies at the food banks and talk about what that looks like. And then we'll share some data from our program so that you guys can see that. And we'll go through what a donation and recycling program looks like. And then we'll go through some lessons learned, and we will leave a lot of time at the end for questions or discussion. If anyone wants to discuss anything or they have questions about anything that we go over today. So with that being said, so Feeding New York State. So I'm Jay Hawkins with Feeding New York State, and our mission at Feeding New York State is to create a unified effort for a hunger-free New York. So with that being said, our food recovery program began right around the same time the New York State Food Donation and Food Scraps Recycling Law went into place. So around January of 2022. And so what we really focus on, and what we've been focused on from the beginning, is helping the 1,100 or so generators that are now on the designated food scrap generator list set up donation programs, partnering them with food banks and agencies, and then making sure other facets of the donation program are all set. And so we have 10 member food banks. And so they're all regional, and we have a nice little graph there. As you can see, 2 of the service areas are shared. So New York City is shared, and then Long Island is shared. What I will say for everyone that's on the call today is that New York City has their own ordinances, so they don't fall under the New York State Food Donation and Food Scraps Recycling Law. They have their own laws that they follow in New York City, a little bit different than what we're going to be talking about today. With that being said, our 10-member food banks have about 4,000 partner agencies. So I know some of you guys are on the call that are partner agencies with the food banks, and I know there's probably some of you that are not affiliated with the food banks that are on the call, which is really great, because I think, it takes all of us doing this work, especially right now. I mean, obviously we're all aware of what's happening with the government shutdown and SNAP being cut. And so this is just a really important time for us. And so really our mission, that creating a unified effort, is the unified part is really you guys and the work that some of you are doing along with our food banks and their partner agencies is just amazing work. And, we're trying to close the gap as much as we can right now with that. So with that being said, Josh.
Yeah. I'm Josh Enderly, waste reduction consultant with CET. We're an environmental nonprofit, and our focus is on finding ways to reduce waste for businesses, restaurants, and institutions. I work in the New York State program, so I can go anywhere across the state to help those entities find opportunities to both reduce wasted food, donate what they can, and ideally recycle the rest. And we do this through our no-cost technical assistance. Thanks to funding from DEC, we can go in at no cost and do on-site assessments with the stakeholders just to see the opportunities that they have at their location and come up with a tailored list of solutions that we can help them implement. So we're there from the start to the end of it, hoping to build those relationships both with the stakeholders there, but also as well as other community organizations such as like the food banks, pantries, and other locations. Um, so while our focus is definitely kind of on the recycling, donation is definitely a a focus of ours too. We want to put food to the best and highest use, and ideally give food to the people that need it the most. So through our work, we've diverted about 43,000 tons of waste from the landfill. And so it's really these partnerships and these kind of collaborative efforts that really make that possible. I want to kind of talk through the food scrap donation law a little bit, as many of you know, but just to have a solid ground here, effective in 2022, for these entities that are identified by New York State, where they are required to donate as much edible food as possible and to recycle all the remaining food scraps if they're within 25 miles of an organics recycler. And so definitely where our work comes in is making those connections where if entities are unsure, like what services are nearby or just need some help connecting to a hauler that can service their area. That's where we can kind of excel there. And there's more information on the DEC website as far as the list goes and as well as the requirements. But recently, there's been some changes. So effective January 2027, this will similar requirement, but it'll lower it from 2 tons to 1 ton of wasted food per week. So we'll gain more designated food scraps generators that will be required to donate, as well as to recycle the food scraps if they're within 50 miles radius of an organics recycler. And that further will ratchet down in 2029 to include institutions and generators that produce half a ton of food scraps or more per week. So we're really looking forward to, helping build out that ecosystem for both recycling, but also increased donation opportunities to get more food out there to our communities.
So now we kind of get into the fun stuff. I'm going to share some data with you guys. So this is a list of generators that are donating by food bank. So as I mentioned, there's about 1,141 generators that are required to donate. And so right now, our food banks are partnered. The 10 food banks that I mentioned are partnered with 643 of those. And that's about 56% of the total amount of generators. Now, obviously, there's that gap of about 500 or so. And we know, based on the reporting that's going to the DEC at the end of every year, but just talking to our food banks as well, that some of these generators are also working with agencies that aren't affiliated with the food bank, or they're working with multiple agencies, including the food bank and their partner agencies. But I wanted to share this with you guys just so you guys could see the impact that our food recovery program and our food banks are having on the law, and which generators, specifically how many generators we're currently working with. And then next, enabled partner agencies. So and many of you probably know what this means, but an enabled partner agency or enabled food relief organization is one of the ones that the food banks work with that have the capacity to do pickups. They've had the training, they're serve safe, food safety trained, and they have the equipment to do pickups safely as well. So they have the thermometers, they have the digital scales, they have the freezer blankets. So they have all of that. And generally, if you are an enabled partner agency and you work with the regional food bank to become an enabled partner agency, they will provide you guys with that equipment at no cost for the agency. And so we do receive funding from the DEC, and we're able to provide that as pass through to the food banks, who then purchase a lot of that equipment, and then they're able to provide that to their partner agencies who become enabled. And as I mentioned earlier, we got about 4,000 total partner agencies across the entire state. About 579, so about 600 of the 4,000 agencies are enabled and able to do pickups, and do pickups safely, and do pickups the right way. And so that turns out to be about 15% of total partner agencies, which we would love for that to be a little higher. The goal really is to be around 25 to 28%. That's the national average as far as across the country. And that data is from Feeding America. So we're getting there, and we're growing our enabled partner agency program all the time. And some food banks have had a head start, and they're doing really well. And then we have some that we need to work on, but I wanted to share that with you guys as well. And then for Feeding New York State, this is the trajectory of pounds that we've recovered since the law was implemented and went into place. So as you can see, and just for context, I know it's on here, but our fiscal year is from July 1st through June 30th. And so first year out of the gate, 2022, we had about 1 million pounds. And then the year after that, we were around close to 3 million pounds. And then we received some more pass-through funding to pass on to our food banks. And either they were able to hire more drivers or buy more vehicles, or they were able to pass it on to their enabled agencies that we just talked about, for their enabled agencies to do some of this food recovery work. We've had enabled agencies where we've been able to buy them refrigerated vans, trucks, able to pay for drivers for them. And that's where you see the increase in pounds. But year to date, we're at about 64 million pounds, which is, or not year to date, program to date, we're at about 64 million pounds. So since the beginning, this year so far, we're right around 9 million pounds, which is on track to end the year right around 25, 26 million. So we're still staying on track. And we're trying to add, we'll talk more about this as we go, but we're trying to add new generators. We're doing really well. We've captured about 95% of the retail space as far as the designated food scrap generator list goes. But there's a lot of work to do when it comes to manufacturing and wholesalers. And so there's a gap there for us to really take advantage of. So setting up a donation program. So pretty simple. Who can take donations? They just have to be a registered 501c3. So food banks, their partner agencies, or any partner agencies, if they're not affiliated with the food banks, are able to take donations. And that is, and And that is the message that we pass on to the generators as well as the DEC. So making connections, really important part of setting up a donation program. You guys could see the picture here, and I'll just give you some context there before we move over to the other side here. But this was a refrigerated van that we were able to, with the pass-through funding from the DEC, we were able to work with the Food Bank of Southern Tier to purchase a van for Chow in Broome County. And this, I believe, was a Wise grocery store that we kind of went and with them to do pickups. And so that's one of the projects that I was talking about. Really great project. They're doing an awesome job over there working with Southern Tier. We really couldn't be happier with that program right now. But really, as far as Feeding New York State goes, we will connect the generator business that want to donate with the regional food bank, and then from there the regional food bank will partner them with a enabled agency that makes sense. So if the enabled partner agency can handle, they have larger capacity and they can handle larger donations, then we would partner them with that agency. But if it's an agency and they can only handle smaller donations, then we would keep that in mind as well. But what we want to really show generators when we go in and have a conversation with them is how donating is beneficial for them. So a lot of times they just think of it as it's another task. It's going to cost them more labor. It's more training for them, but they don't really know what's in it for them. And so we really try to approach it like that when we're having these conversations. So obviously timely removal of items that they can't sell anymore, but they're still edible and they still can be donated. Obviously your trash bill goes down significantly. Opens up the dock space, which we're aware of. And then they also think that it's going to be something where they have to add people to a schedule or make, or makes like certain adjustments. And we don't do that. We try to make a schedule that works for not only the agency, but also that's doing the pickup, but also works for the generator that we're picking up from. And obviously, the other good part about it is they're making a difference in their community, which we all know is really important. And then next year, so after we make that connection, we set up an initial visit. And so that initial visit, what it looks like is we set up a meeting with the recipient agency. Usually it's an enabled agency, so a food program or a food rescue organization that the food bank has partnered the generator with. In instances where the generator is a little bit larger and maybe it's a manufacturer and they're donating thousands of pounds versus 200, 300 pounds, then it may be the food bank picking up, but most of the time it's an agency. So we set that meeting up, and then the first meeting includes staff from whoever's receiving the donations, and then the generator that is now a donor, and the key category leads, managers, and then anybody from the partner agency that needs to be there. And then during that meeting, what they should be doing and what we encourage is that they discuss best practices. A lot of times generators will have their own guidelines on what they can donate. And then obviously, once again, the agency will have guidelines on what they can accept. The food bank has their own food safety guidelines. We're all aware of the Food Keeper app, which shows extended shelf life guidelines. So that would be the conversation that happens during the initial visit after the generator agrees to start a donation program. Next, so everyone's favorite part. So reporting best practices. So generally speaking, what'll happen is after about a month of donations or so, the donor and the food bank or the partner agency will work to set goals, and not just a goal of like, hey, this is the total pounds, like this is what the goal should be, but like goals like, hey, you know, these are the categories, like, you know, dairy, meat, frozen produce, and, you know, what do you guys anticipate, you know, like the pounds being for each of those categories. And I think that's where the goals and the pilot period comes into place. We have at the food banks, and I have to report back to the DEC once a month, total pounds. So generally what happens is the food, the partner agency will report back to the food bank the total pounds by category for each generator, each donor that they're working with. And then the food bank reports it back to me, and then I'll report it to the DEC. And then on top of that, if you guys weren't already familiar with this, and I know we mentioned it briefly, but the DEC also requires annual reporting on the amount of food donated if you are required under the law to donate, and you meet that criteria. You have to report to them at the end of the year how much food you donated as a business. So a lot of times they get that data from the food banks or the partner agency, because there's not really there isn't a formula that converts like retail dollars when they scan something out as shrink, or they scan it out as donations on their handheld scanner. There's not a formula after that that converts those retail dollars into pounds. So the only way that the generators in these businesses know the pounds that they're actually donating is if either they're weighing it before they donate it at the store, or if the agency or food bank is weighing it and keeping track of it for them. And generally it's the latter, right? Because a lot of these generators and businesses don't have time to do that. And the whole point of setting up a donation program is to make it as easy as possible. So most food banks visit their donors a few times a year just to go over, you know, the results. If there's categories, like let's say that they were doing really well for a little while donating produce, and then the last, you know, few months or so it's non-existent, they're not donating any. That's when you go in and have the conversation so that the agency that's picking up can see that increase and have that food to give, you know, to the community that they serve. And then food banks of Feeding New York State partner with the food generator or donor, and we will provide in-store training, or if it's not a store, if it's a manufacturer or another place, we'll provide that training around what a donation program looks like, what the food bank and agency can accept, just because, and you guys all know this probably, but turnover in retail and even manufacturing, you know, is very high. And sometimes they'll have part-time associates, or they'll have students that work there and then they're gone in like 4 or 5 months. So if a store reaches out to us and said, you know, or the food bank, and the food bank reaches out to us and they want help with training, we will support the food bank in doing that. And then obviously, you know, the food bank's always reviewing program performance, as well as myself. And then the food bank, if they see something, they would work with the agency to see if there needs to be retraining, or maybe it's just a quick conversation. So that's the reporting best practices. And then Josh is going to talk a little bit about the recycling program.
Yeah, and that definitely goes hand in hand with the training to make sure that everyone knows, is on the same page, like what quality of food can be donated versus, you know, should be recycled. I've personally I've volunteered with a food rescue organization, and love to see the enthusiasm from some people, but There's been some times where we've gotten fruits and fresh produce that's more on the right side of this apple scale, as you can see, where it's bruised and you wouldn't shop for it for yourself. And so that's definitely something we want to avoid in donation for giving for those in need. So what we have done in the past, like we work closely with Feeding New York State, and one of the resources that we helped put together and collaborated on is this kind of the pictures on the right here is like a more full guide of showing pictures of what types of items are donatable. So boxed and canned goods that are, still whole and not broken like at the bottom. Just making sure that they're going in the right places. And as far as for recycling too, we can help find those locations, the end sites that can accept packaged items as well. Of course, depending on location, but having those connections to make it easy on the food bank and the pantry level as well to recycle the excess food, even if it's packaged, is a priority of ours. And yeah, as well as what we can help with that. And also on the next slide, we have some pictures of our signage that we can provide. Again, just going back to the training, the importance of training and having everyone on the same page, both at the store and at the business level, but also at the site where you're donating to. Just make sure that everyone knows the same contact to reach out to the types of food that's accessible and when they'll be picked up. And as well as like mentioning our on-site assistance, maybe locating refrigerator space, and walk-in fridge space that can be dedicated to food donations. So just having a shelf where everything can go in one spot and be picked up pretty quickly and is accessible. Just making it physically as easy as possible to donate rather than just throwing it into the landfill. So in our signage here in the donation on the left, we have room for that to be filled out by, by the customer that we're working with, just make sure everything is up to date. And we can also, on our end, customize these as well, both the lists of items and the pictures, just to make sure that everything is consistent, and also providing, translation as well, just to make sure that it's very clear for all folks.
And Josh, just so everyone on the call is aware, if they were interested in signage such as this, is this something that you could help with, or?
That is absolutely something that we can help with. So inquiries that we have, so if anyone's looking for that kind of level of assistance, feel free to either, reach out to me directly, or we have a hotline that we have listed at the end of the slide here that you can call, and as well as like an email that you can send out, just to let us know, hey, we're looking for this kind of resource. Can you be of assistance? And then we'll be able to, help from there.
So getting into a little bit about a little bit more about the food safety piece. So liability protections. So the federal Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Donation Act basically provides liability protection for generators and businesses that donate food in good faith, and they're donating it to a nonprofit organization. And then the nonprofit organization that receives the donated food is not reselling it, and it's going to the community that needs it. And so these liability protections are so important when you're having conversations with new generators and those that want to set up a donation program, because one of their biggest concerns is donating items that are towards the end of their shelf life, and especially their brand, so the private labels, that's towards the end of their shelf life, and that they don't want someone to get sick, obviously one of their customers, and so they're kind of worried about that. There's never been a lawsuit in New York State for food that's been donated in good faith, and so so it's important to know that, but it's important just to have, and this is like a one pager that is available right online that you can access, or you can reach out to me and I can provide it for you too, so you have it. And then tax incentives. So I usually, when they ask me about tax incentives, I do tell them that in order to receive the credit, that you have to present a receipt or letter, and we can provide that. But as far as how much they get and other things like that, I always tell them to chat with their accountant, just because we're not accountants and I don't know that information. But there are other tools online, and one of them is right here, and this is a great tool in general for everyone, is the DEC guidance document. You guys can access that right on the DEC website that Josh had up earlier. And it provides a little more insight into the tax incentives. And then we just want to get into some lessons learned, and I'll let Josh kick it off. Josh, I think you did a case study, right, about the University of Buffalo?
Yeah, so that's the one I want to highlight today, University of Buffalo, where they have a donation program both on their campus has been going really well. This is a case where CET was able to help extend a successful program. And while they had a program on their main campus, at their medical campus, there was opportunity at their retail level for the sandwiches and things to be donated to a local program. So basically, across the street for them was a Salvation Army, which had a family meal program, a weekly program. And so we were able to help make those connections between them. And so all the excess sandwiches and things was able to go to that program versus being landfilled as it was previously. And so even though it's like close, sometimes it's easy to miss, especially with folks and generators being busy and like working on a lot of different projects. Having an outside agency, CET, or Feeding New York State to help give that extra assistance to make those connections possible, for sure. And so, Jay, I'll kick it back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. So, and then I had just a couple, and I did write longer case studies out, but just wanted to share some examples with you guys of, how we've kind of implemented the law and worked with the food banks, and then how we expanded some donation programs. So one of the ones that's a perfect example of that, and some of you on the call may have worked with Tops Friendly Markets or currently are working with them. So when the law initially went into place, one of the larger grocery chains on there was Tops. And so, one of the things I did initially was I reached out to Tops and I just said, hey, just, following up, went over the law with them. They were aware of it. They received the letter. But they said that, at that time, they were only donating bakery, and they thought that that was the maximum extent practicable in their mind, because it kind of is subjective. But they thought in their mind that that was, all that they could donate, because they were worried about food safety in other categories, like frozen and produce. They were worried about food safety, and they weren't necessarily aware of the protections, the liability protections. And so, it took a while for us to really kind of sit down with them, go through best practices. They were able to create what they now call Tops Fresh Recovery Program, which was really in depth for each category. And the way they approach their Fresh Recovery Program, if you guys don't know this, some of you may, is they expect every single one of their stores to have donations in every category that they're donating. And so we were able to work with Tops to expand from just bakery to all of their categories. And they're doing just an absolute excellent job right now. It's really one of the bigger wins that came out of the implementation of the New York State Food Donation Food Scraps Recycling Law. And we're currently working with them on a regular basis. We have calls with them every quarter or so with all of the food banks that have Tops or multiple Tops in their service area, and we kind of just get on a call, talk about best practices, talk about ways to improve the fresh food rescue, fresh recovery programs in the stores. And then if there's barriers with agencies or something isn't going correctly, then we're able to either work through that as a group, or the food bank will work directly, with the Tops and work through that with them. And we have had issues where, there was a Tops where, an agency called the food bank concerned because they donated a large ham, but they didn't freeze it before they donated it. And they just donated it. It was cold still, but it wasn't frozen. And that's not the process. Obviously, we all know that. And so it's just a simple conversation. The food bank went back and had the conversation with Tops, and it was fixed immediately, and it hasn't happened since. But Tops expanding from bread to other categories was amazing. And then another one that we have on here, and some of you may be familiar with this name, some of you might not. Uncle Giuseppe's is a specialty grocer out in Long Island. And so they have, I want to say about 10 stores in Long Island. And so I believe 3 or 4 are on the DFSG list as having to donate. And so, same thing with them. They were really concerned about, just their brand and their private label and donating and the food safety piece. So we were able to provide them with the outline of the Serve Safe training that the agencies receive that are doing the pickups, so they could see how in depth that training is. But then we were also able to share with them, again, the liability protections. And it's a gradual program with them. So right now they're not donating meat, but they're donating frozen, and they're donating a couple other categories. And it's going really well. So we're kind of taking it a little slower with them. And then when they're comfortable, we'll start getting into the other categories. Just to show that they are working on it, and they've really been a great partner. And we've actually, while only 4 of the stores are on the generator list, the DFSG list of having to donate, they have expanded this program to all 10 of their locations. So they are now doing this in all of their locations on Long Island, not just the ones that are required to donate, which is really great. So and then just some common barriers. So we talked a little bit about it, but food safety seems to be one of the largest concerns of generators and donors. And then staffing and turnover is also a barrier, specifically around the training piece. It doesn't take that much more effort as far as donating, because generally it's just putting it in another box versus throwing it away, which is kind of the same amount of work, but it's really training the employees on what can be donated. And then another barrier, and this is the one we see quite a bit too, not as much as the food safety, but this is right up there, is the maximum extent practical can be very subjective. And so sometimes what we see is, we'll see a store say, hey, we're only, we're donating this, but that's all we can donate. And we try to explain to them, like, okay, you're donating produce, that's great, but what about like dry shelf stable items. And they're like, well, we can't donate that because basically, you know, once it's at its use by or sell by date, we just throw it away. And so we explained to them, you know, and this is kind of where we explain to them the important part of helping them understand the extended shelf life guidelines, and in printing something out and giving it to them, so they know that, hey, you know, cereal lasts forever, and pasta same thing. And so just helping them understand what that actually means, and having a conversation around that. And then another one, we just surveyed some of our enabled agency. Sometimes what we're seeing is product that gets left behind at a generator or at a donor, because let's say, for instance, it's frozen product and they'll leave it behind just because they have no place to store it at the agency. And that doesn't happen all the time, but that's an example of some of the things that we do see. And then another one is just lack of communication. You know, an agency can't make it to the store because, you know, they don't have a driver to do it, or whatever the case may be. And so that's, you know, that happens more than a couple times. The store starts losing momentum, and we start losing interest in actually setting up and maintaining a successful donation program. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Josh.
Yeah, that's another thing is kind of along the lines of the food safety, is just making sure that each entity has the required like equipment to transfer it at the proper temperatures. So maybe need some of those not Cambros, but like kind of like insulated containers to get from the generation point to the donation center. Because sometimes there's like what we've encountered as well is like the health department coming in and being like, hey, you need these specific things to be able to donate. And then the donator is gonna be like, okay, well, we can't do it then at that point. So it really is like coming down to like understanding what they need, and then communication about like how to like move on from there, and like what they can set up as far as like making the logistics work without, you know, furthering, you know, being like a hindrance to the operation, but like making everything as seamless as possible.
Cool. And then we just, you know, we're here to help. You guys have questions, you guys want to reach out, both have a call center, and that, you know, and we can work with you guys. Feel free to, you know, that number goes right to my office. I don't know about the CET hotline, if that goes to your main office or.
Yeah, it goes to our outreach team, where we can kind of assess and be like, if this is a hotline level, we can provide a link or phone number to there. If it's a little bit more involved and tricky, then they'll either reach out to me or Renee to help with further assistance.
And then just, this is just more of our contact information for you guys, a link directly to the law, you know, our websites, our emails as well, if you want to get in touch with us. I don't have anything else, Josh. I don't know if we want to open it up for questions, discussion.
Yeah, I definitely would like that. I'm also going to share our CET's kind of library of resources, which includes like donation resources, how to make it easy. So try to outline all the specifics you need to think through.
Gotcha. Okay.
Thank you both so much for sharing. It's a lot of information, and I know a lot of us, even though we're in this realm, don't always know of everything that's out there, and what's going on. So this is super, super helpful. Does anyone have any questions for Jay or Josh? Feel free to write it in the chat as well. I will start with one to get us off. I'm curious, because I know generators legally currently they have to be a certain size or producing a certain amount of waste. Is there, maybe this is more specific to Josh, is there like a sweet spot size that you found for generators to donate? I know some places are so small and staff and time is limited, or as you have, like you mentioned, going to UB. I'm thinking here we have like Cornell, Syracuse University close by. It seems so cumbersome to start with something so big. I'm just curious your experience if there is like a sweet spot in the size of a generator in kind of interacting and getting to the right person.
Yeah, so those larger institutions are definitely a source of opportunity, mostly because they have like a whole, whole kitchen in the back, and they're probably doing different types of food service as well. So not just like sit down restaurant, but they're also probably doing catering, buffets, and event, catering and such. So it's possible to have like that they'll have pans in the back that aren't served that could be donated versus like what is served. On the smaller level, we have seen a lot of like smaller restaurants be like, well, if we do have anything extra, that's just going to go to our staff. So that can be their meals or like food that they can take home. And so that's a very easy way for them to, you know, divert the waste from going to the landfill and just a little bit of perk of work. Like I'm always on the lookout for some free food myself at this office. Always hopeful for an event to happen. And so anything like a little bit larger than that, than like a potentially a smaller local restaurant would be where we're really looking at and be like, okay, you're going to be producing food regularly. We can ideally connect you with a food rescue organization that can be there on time at a regular interval, and then opportunity to look into their processes as well and encourage them to be like, yes, we want people to donate, but also ideally you're not overproducing what you need to, right? And that kind of goes into, making sure that the triple bottom line that is working on all ends for everyone as far as like the financials and then also for environment and for people as well.
Yeah, Josh, I mean, I mean, I think you nailed it with that. But I will say, Hannah, that some of our food banks, just to give you some insight, some of our food banks look at square footage of the generator or the donor. And, generally, if you're looking at a grocery store, you're looking at things like, unless it's a Trader Joe's, which is a little smaller, but like a Price Chopper and a Wegmans, you're looking at like over 80,000 square feet. So they're looking at square footage as, as kind of like I guess, indicator that they may be a better opportunity than another place, just because we don't have access to the actual revenue or sales data. So sometimes we just look at square footage.
That's interesting I hadn't thought of that, but I mean, it makes sense, right? It's a big effort to get a big place on board, and you want to make sure your time and resources are going in the right spaces. So thank you. Any other question? We've got two experts here that have a lot of knowledge for us.
And you guys, just so you know, if you have questions or you're looking for resources, I know Josh mentioned it too, but you can also just go on our website, go on the DEC website at the bottom of this page as well. They have there's a nice one-pager that outlines what the law is, so you can share that with like generators. There's a copy of the letter that went to the generators. There's even the DC guidance document that we mentioned earlier, which has everything in it, including donation guidelines, restaurants versus grocery stores. It kind of breaks everything down. So that's a great tool to utilize as well. So.
Just curious, your work, so this is since 2022, this law. Are you generally encouraged by what you've seen so far and how it's building? I know there's a new kind of marker at 2027, but just curious kind of your overall impression of how this initial rollout has been going.
So the 2 tons right now, so if a business produces over 2 tons a week or more of food scraps, they need to donate. And then, as Josh mentioned, in 27, it'll go down to 1 ton, and then 29, it's half a ton. It's definitely encouraging. We're making a lot of progress. What I will say though is the food is there. It's just a lot of work, and you need resources to do this work, as you guys all know, right? So so there needs to be some planning involved. So to your point, it might not always make sense to go to the largest generator on the list if that's not something that you think you potentially could handle and have the capacity for, as an agency or a food rescue organization. But I will say, a lot of the businesses, are even the ones lately that aren't on the list of having to donate. A lot of businesses want to do it if they can, and they have the excess food, and they feel comfortable with it. And you spend the time teaching them, that it'll save them money, and you kind of walk through them what you're doing with the food, that it's going back to the community. Most of them are completely on board to do it. They just need someone to guide them through that process. So it does take time, and I know time's a valuable resource that everybody wishes they had more of, but it is going real well. We have had some pushback from some stores, but the DC's been doing a really great job lately of sending inspectors out into the field and going to those locations that don't want to comply with the law. And, and we haven't had to find anybody yet, but I think it might happen eventually where we have to start finding folks to get them on board with the program. So.
Wonderful. Well, last chance if anything they'd like to ask. All right. Well, Jay and Josh, thank you again for your time and your presentation. It was very thorough, and we really appreciate it and the work that you're doing.
Thanks,
So
Hannah.
thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it.